Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Andy Fetherman. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Technology at Mueller Martini. Thank you for taking a few moments to go through a presentation on Finishing 4.0, the finishing of things. Mueller Martini has developed this new development and engineering ideology throughout our whole portfolio, and we're going to walk through the basis of the ideas that we have and why it's so important to remember them as you look at finishing, as you go forward, look at finishing investments going forward. As many of you know, Industry 4.0 represents the Internet of Things. With the Internet of Things, the infrastructure it's the infrastructure of the information society, basically connecting together intelligent devices. In everyday life, with our smartphones, with our computers, we do this every day. We looked at that and said that's an important infrastructure for what we're doing in finishing in this new hybrid, offset, and digital world. It also talks about the inextricable mixture of hardware, software, and data. Data is king, and even in the graphic arts industry, that's more and more important with personalization that we experience every day. And that results in improved efficiencies and accuracy and economic benefits so that everything is faster, cheaper, and better. So we thought about those ideologies in the Industry 4.0 and the Internet of Things, and we developed a concept around what we call the finishing of things. Even the acronym and the icon here reflect the importance of that in our industry. With the finishing of things, we looked at our core technologies. We realized that we were ready for such intelligent connectivity of intelligent devices. We knew that the core technology, we had common platforms in our control technology. We knew that touchless workflow we were able to enable that through our control platforms to allow for touchless, humanless setup of the machines. So altogether, it did require customized workflow solutions. And that means integration workshops. No longer do we go in and sell a device and walk away and install it and say, okay, give us your final payment, we're all done. As soon as we sell a device, we say, okay, let's get together on a workshop. Let's put together with your infrastructure, with your IT department, and find incremental cost savings throughout your operation. That required a team approach, where we got together not just with your production managers and your operators, we got together with your IT staff and our engineers to develop the ultimate workflow solutions to develop intelligent systems that are interconnected all together into one complete system. So this is something we had to do in order to develop solutions that would work productively in a very variable environment. As a result of this, we developed our Finishing 4.0 pillars that are critical. And if you take one thing away from this presentation, I would say that's the one. Remember these 5 pillars that we're going to review. I'll repeat them at the end so that it's easy to remember. But whenever you're looking at devices from Mueller Martini or any finishing devices within the industry, make sure they have these 5 key criteria to make sure it matches what you need today and, more importantly, in the future. First is automation, and we'll talk about that in more detail, but automation is not just putting a servo motor on a spindle anymore. We've been doing that for decades. It's about core automation down to the base machine level and how that's required for the other capabilities and the other pillars we're going to talk about in a moment. Then once you have that automation, you have to be able to connect it together. Now connectivity we'll talk about can be XML based through JDF files. It could also be barcodes, little license plates, the barcodes that are on the product that drive make ready on downstream equipment. But that connectivity has to be intelligent and thorough throughout the entire process. And this is all to address the variability that's inherent in print and finishing today. Inkjet, toner-based systems, cut sheet, roll-fed, and offset all together is a mix of hybrid and variable technologies that is pretty easy to print anything in any size, but finishing anything in any size is a little more difficult. We'll talk about how we use this pillar and develop solutions to make that most productive in the finishing side. And then there's touchless workflow. It's driving the automation through connectivity to address the variability through touchless workflow. It allows you to use those XML files or those license plates and barcodes and driving the make ready on equipment that might be hours or days later downstream from the print process. That's very important. That kind of ties it all together into a real complete system. And over the top is this umbrella of hybrid. We mentioned before about you got cut sheet and roll fed digital, you have cut sheet and roll fed offset. All this is coming together at many of your operations. So you have to have systems that are able to process not only either or, but at times the same input from digital and offset on the same machine, either at the same time or at different times. So let's dig a little bit deeper into each one of these pillars and show how Mueller-Martini has developed solutions to support the Finishing 4.0 ideology. This digital solutions portfolio you see here shows all of our solutions. It shows saddle stitching, perfect binding, casing in, hardcover, sewing, inline processing for developing and producing signatures and book blocks off a high-speed inkjet device. All of these solutions were developed with the Finishing 4.0 pillars behind the ideology, behind the basis of the engineering. We looked at each one and said, let's make devices that are scalable, that have investment protection, that have that connectivity that's required to connect these intelligent systems together from the PDF all the way through to the finished product. And we'll talk about that in more detail as we dig into examples of this portfolio and how they relate to the different pillars we just described. Let's take the one that I said was the simplest one, the automation one. This is something that we've all been doing for a long time in the manufacturing space. But what we've done a little differently, as you see here, we've gone down to the component level of the machine. Here's an inside look of our Legbo Perfect binder. And inside every station of that binder is individually servo driven. The actual devices are the spine prep station, the glue stations, the nipping stations, all of which are individually driven. No more chains that drive the whole system that stretch and lose tolerance over time. And not only that, it also gives much greater modularity. You can switch out from a hot melt to a PR very quickly because it just clips onto this real sturdy base frame. And each one of those devices are individually servo driven. Greater repeatability of the settings. And that allows you to run touchless workflow to drive the make ready of these devices with greater accuracy over a longer period of time. So when you look at automation, don't get sucked into little devices where someone takes an old technology and puts motors on a spindle to drive a nipping or scoring plates, scoring wheels on a device, on a perfect binder. Look at the core technology. Was it developed from the ground up with automation? With Mueller-Martini, you'll find that's true. Now the connectivity. We talked about Internet of Things, connecting intelligent devices together. We do that within our systems. Here's our square bubble that I like to call it. It's our Connects workflow solution, which is a file to finished product workflow that allows you to simply take a PDF file in, and really that's all we need from you as a customer. Give us a pre-flighted PDF file, and if we're generating book blocks or generating rolls for processing on a saddle stitcher, we can handle the imposition, the mark insertion, we can handle the connecting of that with the JDF file that we generate within our Connects workflow automatically to generate book blocks and rolls that are processed downstream. And on those book blocks and rolls, we embed all those license plates, those barcodes I mentioned earlier, that allow us to connect that PDF that came into us raw all the way through to the finished product at the end, whether it's a saddle stitching, a perfect binder, to allow you to guarantee cover match, to guarantee the validation of the products. And we'll get into that as we talk about variability later into this presentation. But that connectivity in this bubble here is a combination of JDF files, a combination of workflow solutions that drive the make ready through the process of printing the product, whether it's a roll or a book block, and embedding those intelligent license plates, those barcodes, throughout the process, and also barcodes or marks that you need within your operation. Because Mueller-Martini knew that what we develop is what we need for our systems, but maybe you have legacy systems or competitive solutions that you want to also drive. We can embed those also. So it's a very open architecture system that allows a very streamlined processing of variable products through the print process and making them ready for finishing downstream. Now this is all to address the variability. And as I speak here, you're going to see our folding and collating solution generating and switching over between formats on the fly. I mentioned earlier, we take the files in, and that's all you do. We impose it, we queue them up intelligently by paper type, by format, by thickness, by time to market when they have to get out in the shipping. So we know what's gang together. So we know that this batch of jobs is a 6 by 9, the next batch of jobs is an 8.5 by 11. And we know that you have to change the fold schemes and the cut lengths within our folding solution. So what you're seeing here, in between those batches, you have 10 jobs of 6 by 9 and 8 jobs of 8.5 by 11. We say, you know what? In between, we're going to automatically insert a white job. It's about 100, 150 feet of web that allows the system, as you see in this video, to change from a 6 across on a 42-inch wide web, 6 by 9 product, to a 4 across on a 36-inch wide web, 8.5 by 11. That allows the changeover with the former nose as you come off the former nose or on the former nose for folding. It includes lengthening or shortening the cut of the cut cylinder, of the cross-fold cylinder, of the chopping cylinder, the end stop to position it properly so you're chopping in the right location. All of this is done automatically because we know the next batch is larger. We know we went from a 6 by 9 to an 8.5 by 11, and we track through the system with a thing we call product vectors to track through the system at what point the white job begins, open the gate and start rejecting it. And as that white job goes through and does what you see on the video here and moving the web and making the cut length changes on the fly, it's rejecting that signatures, as you see in this video right now. And as soon as the job's done, it closes the gate because we know where the white job ends because we sent the next job in. It closes it and the first page of that next book is accurate and being collated in our collator. So by having this connectivity and dealing with the intelligence of a system approach for printing, you're able to automatically seamlessly change over on the fly. And that type of variability allows you to print like this and finish like this much greater. Variability has another dynamic though also. When you look at variability from the perspective of scalability, you need investment protection in your solution. And here I show a saddle stitch portfolio where if you're working down here on the saddle stitcher, maybe it's a simple 6 and a cover, non-digital, just straight offset saddle stitcher. At any time you can add cut sheet devices for pile fed, roll and pile fed, or even a fully inline solution where you can have a printer feeding right in through our folder, right into a saddle stitcher. But you don't need to know what you need today. Have that investment protection because the uncertainty and the variability of your life now in this new variable world, you need investment protection where systems you buy today, you have confidence in buying them because you know that the digital scalability, the hybrid scalability you're going to need later through a small incremental investment is there today. And that's variability that's in a little bit of a more eclectic perspective, but it's important to have it because otherwise you're not able to protect your investment going forward and then you won't buy anything as a result because you're afraid of what's next. This protects that. The next pillar was touchless workflow. We talked about you have this automation, you have this connectivity in these barcodes that are embedded in our workflow that we described just a moment ago to address that variability that's inherent in this world. But you need to be able to drive that automatically. So here you see a video of our Vario Perfect binder, and here's a screen showing cover match. So that license plate that you embedded on that book block is being used to match to the barcode that's on the cover to guarantee the integrity of the match of the book. So that book comes through the Vario, and when you're on your way in, you're measuring the thickness of that book, you're reading that barcode, you're making sure the cover matches, you're going through the binder, and then the barcode that's on that cover is also used downstream in our Infinitrim. You'll see in a moment on the video, the Infinitrim takes the books in, and all you do is read that barcode. And you're going to see 8 different formats coming off this trimmer that were just bound on the Vario, of different thicknesses, different formats, that are trimmed to all different size books. There's that variability I mentioned. Okay, the raw format is common, but the format coming out is very uncommon. And our operators are doing nothing. The one guy's standing there catching books, the other guy's explaining what's going on. And this was at Drupa, by the way. And you'll see all the book blocks coming out. And that variability is true example of touchless workflow, where a barcode had this machine, our Infinitrim, at 2,000 books an hour. That means 2,000 fully variable length, width, and thickness books an hour. Sounds a lot more powerful that way, right? That allows you to drive that just by a simple barcode and have that touchless workflow you need to avoid human error in setup and to have a seamless workflow from book to book, even in a book of one. But it's not just for creating book blocks or creating perfect bound books. This same type of touchless workflow exists in our saddle stitching portfolio, our sewing portfolio, our hardcover portfolio. And here's another example. Whether you're doing batch production or you're doing book of one production on your saddle stitcher, this one happens to have roll and pile capabilities. Those barcodes that were embedded in that PDF way back in stage one when we talked about connectivity, those barcodes drive the content validation, drive the compliance that every book that you need done is done. And if it's not, we record that it's not done. So it's not just one book of 50, it's book 17 of 50. So we know that book for Mr. Smith is not complete. We capture that. How do we know that? Because that barcode is encrypted. We encrypted it in our mark insertion back in the beginning when we did the imposition. And that mark insertion allows us to encrypt that so that we know that SIG 1 of book 17 was missing. That's why we rejected book 17. And it comes up in the list at the end saying book 17 was rejected, missing a signature. Maybe it was a cover mismatch. Maybe it was a double feed on the cover feeder. But in any case, you're allowed to have, you use that barcode to drive the make ready, to drive the validation and the compliance and reading over what's being put into this book. So that if you're doing a prospectus, a financial book, or a healthcare book, there's a lot of compliance issues from HIPAA and many other organizations that you have to have confidence that at high-speed production of these one-off books, the content is perfect. Through Touchless workflow, we can guarantee that the barcodes check that book-to-book, signature to signature. You're guaranteed that everything inside that book is accurate. And it's done through the process of measuring the thickness by reading the thickness on the barcode and changing thickness on the fly too. So the touchless workflow goes beyond just validation. It goes to the setup level, even in our saddle stitcher. So look for these type of touchless workflow solutions that take that automation and drive it to the maximum potential by keeping the human aspect of it out as much as possible. Now let's get to the last pillar, the hybrid systems. We said very early on, this was the umbrella that encompasses all the other pillars of Finishing 4.0. This image here is an image of a system that we showed at both Drupa and Graph Expo in 2016. It allowed us to have rolls off a continuous feed inkjet, sheets off a cut sheet inkjet or toner-based device, or even cut sheet off a roll-fed device, to be fed into a saddle stitcher. And those license plates, those barcodes, we embed it way back in phase one during the connectivity discussions, drive the hybrid finishing of the product. Now, why is it hybrid? Because we take that digital content and we take offset printed content and we put it in the pockets. In the case of Drupa, we had, and Graph Expo, we had a card in one of the pockets. We had a pre-stitched 32-page booklet in another pocket, and we had a cover in another cover feeder. And there's 4 different booklets that we produced. I'm going to run a video now that shows an excerpt from Drupa where there's 4 booklets we produced. They had different colors on the image, on the inside, so you can see on the saddle when the red image came, certain things happened. When you saw the blue image, other things happened. And one of the images, one of the books was just straight digital. It didn't pull anything out of any of the pockets. It was 20 pages of straight digital. The next booklet pulled just the card out and the cover that matched the content of the digital, 1-to-1. The next one pulled the card out and the pre-stitched booklet, but no cover. And the last one did all 4. So what you're seeing here is it's allowing that barcode to drive seamlessly this, what I call, digitally printed, barcode-enabled selective binding. We've all known about selective binding in the past, but now your digital barcode, through touchless workflow and automation of our systems, drives the makeup of that book real time. And like I said just a moment ago about validation and compliance, we're validating that that book is getting everything it's supposed to have, has every signature for Mr. Smith and Mrs. Jones and everyone else that's in this book of one run. And if it doesn't, we'll reject the product out and tell you which ones didn't get done properly. And that goes back to pre-press. You send a small lift to your cut sheet device, put it in the cut sheet pile of the stitcher, and you finish that job up. So this type of validation and this type of hybrid control allows you to produce books that could be straight digital, straight offset, or a combination of offset and digital on the same device. And that's one thing that we talked about, bringing commercial quality finishing to the digital market. What better way to bring commercial quality finishing than to have the same finishing device produce both digital and offset product. Then the product quality and the finishing side is obviously identical because it's the identical machine doing it. So you'll see on the video clip in just a moment when they start running here, you're going to see that it's dropping down the different products, and you'll see automatically from book to book, could be 2, 3, 10, 1. It just sees the barcode. So, okay, this is the red one, so don't do anything. This is the green one, so pull it out of these pockets. And it's done on the fly. Very powerful. And people say, why would you do that? Because sometimes you want that personalization, but you don't want the whole book to be personalized because it's too costly to print all the pages digitally. So print the centerfold digital, print the cover digital, have them personalized, but then the other 32 pages of that booklet, print them offset. Pull them into the book. Maybe that could be all your high margin stuff from a catalog perspective. And now the unit cost of that book is lower because it's a combination, gives you the bang of personalization, but the cost of offset brings the unit cost down. So that's what hybrid systems can do when they're using intelligent touchless workflow. Now this eye chart here, this is an example that I put up because it kind of pulls every piece of touchless, of finishing 4.0 into a workflow that we enabled at a customer here in North America. Now we're going to keep the customer anonymous, but I will say that this is running live today. And you'll see there's 5 tiers here. Actually 6 tiers, my apologies. The top one happens to be HP Production Center. Then the next one is our Connects workflow solution. The next one is Ultimate InpoStrip, which we have imposing underneath our square bubble we mentioned earlier. Then the next one's the DFE, the print engine, then the Presto line, control, and then the Presto Stitcher itself. Here we're actually driving a roll-to-roll workflow. That's correct. Mueller Martini is driving through our Connects workflow solution roll-to-roll printing. The reason we're doing that is we know the limits and what we can do in our Stitcher downstream, which is going to be processing those rolls. So we, at the very top level, we worked with Production Center and HP. They're sending us JDF files automatically into Connects. And we talked about once they come in, we queue them up intelligently. So let's say in this example, there's 14 jobs on this roll. So as soon as we receive those 14 jobs from Production Center, we send to Ultimate and say, go grab those PDF files from the book folder at a certain IP address that you're told us where it is. We pull it in, we impose it. Then we go back to Connects to get the mark encryption with our mark inserting program. And then we insert the marks during the imposition process. So they're placed precisely on the untrimmed image for downstream processing. And they're encrypted properly because we know what encryption we need for our equipment. And then once this is printed, that roll is put in storage. But just before we do that, we actually send a print page to a printer. It's a small little printer on a desktop printer. And that slip sheet is then taped onto the outside of the roll by the press operator. So on that sheet, it tells you which 14 jobs are on the roll. And there's a barcode on that slip sheet, which we use later. I'll talk about in just a moment. So now you have this identified roll with 14 jobs you put in whip storage. So minutes, hours, or days later, you're going to process that roll on the Stitcher. So now we get down to the 5th level down here, where now it gets to the line control. You bring the roll over to the Stitcher, and you actually, with a handheld barcode, you read the barcode on that slip sheet. And that job barcode says these 14 jobs, look, you can see it here. It pulls it down from Production Center, those 14 jobs again. And it populates those jobs into the line control of the Presto. So now as soon as you start running the job, it sees the barcode with the job number. It automatically knows which of the 14 jobs this first book is, and it processes it through the Stitcher based upon that information. And then if that's not enough, at the end of all that, we obviously track during the process what was done well and what wasn't, and we report back to Production Center, or I keep saying Production Center, it can be your system too. We work with Prinigy, we worked with legacy systems. It doesn't matter. This is simple XML data that can be sent back to any MIS or prepress system. And we tell you what was done in the Stitcher, which books made it, which ones didn't, and then you can go back to prepress to reprint the ones that were missed. So I know this is a lot of information here, but it was a perfect example of connectivity, automation, touchless workflow, variability, and hybrid solutions working together in a very elaborate and very productive and efficient workflow. So through this presentation, we talked about a lot of things. And there's a lot of examples that might be a little too much to digest in 20, 25 minutes. But I think what I would like you to take away are these 5 pillars of finishing 4.0. Remember, automation, It can't just be putting motors on a spindle. It has to be down to the base core of the technology, driving automation from the ground up on the designs. That's what Mueller Martini has been doing for years now. Taking that automation and connecting it together, whether it's through XML feeds, we gave several examples of that through our PDF to finished book block workflow, finished product workflow, or it's through these license plates or barcodes that we encrypt and embed through our mark insertion process. And even your IT department can also embed those very easily to drive the downstream finishing. And this is all to address the variability in printing so we can handle that variability in finishing. The great example of that was the InfiniTrim, where we showed any size book being trimmed book to book with no human intervention. Great example of dealing with variability by using touchless workflow. Driving the automation through connectivity, XML and barcode-based connectivity to address the variability with touchless workflow that eliminates keying in the wrong mistakes, allowing you to go book to book without any human intervention, because it's impossible to go to book with human beings changing over. And the last is that hybrid systems approach, making sure your systems can do offset today and are scalable to do digital tomorrow, and even the same, both offset and digital at the same time on the same machine. No longer can digital finishing be inferior. It has to have the same quality as commercial quality of offset in the past. If you're using the same system to do that, you're guaranteed it. So that's Finishing 4.0. That's the engineering philosophy and the ideology behind our portfolio of digital solutions in saddle stitching, perfect binding, hardcover, sewing, finishing signatures or book blocks off a high-speed inkjet line, and everything in between. Thank you so much for your time. Again, my name is Andy Fetherman. Please feel free to contact me. My contact information on the screen, or any of your regional sales managers, and they'll be happy to give you more information on our portfolio of digital solutions and Finishing 4.0. Thank you so much, and have a great day.